Hi, this is Kate Carrow. It's Thursday, the 30th of July. Dear Dean and Chapter, last year you invited me to help establish and join a choir parents committee so that we could contribute our ideas about the running of the choir and help you make a success of it. Chapter decided not to ask for our opinion about whether closing the choir was the best course of action for making a success of things, so you may no longer be interested in my point of view. But I think you trusted me before, so perhaps you might still be open to hearing my thoughts. In case you are, here are my thoughts about the Dean's address on Sunday. I'm sorry it's taken me a few days to put them together. We are still on holiday in the lakes. I agree with your ambition to pursue excellence. I like the idea of diversifying what we do to better meet the needs of the city. Your ideas about changing the times of services, bringing in more instruments, and singing a wide repertoire of music are also great. I can see why the congregation applauded you last year when you laid out this vision following the 2019 music review. However, although your vision is sound, closing the choir was not part of your original response to the 2019 review. You've only decided to do this recently, and I don't think that closing the choir is the best way to achieve your vision. Your senior administrator has admitted that they don't really understand how choirs work, and people are wondering whether the Dean and Chapter lack this insight too. But the congregation trust you. They are loyal, faithful people, and they don't want to believe that they might be being let down by people in authority whom they've always respected. They believe it is our position to have faith in you. I have faith in God, but not always in the people who he loves. I do respect the Dean in terms of what he preaches, his theology, and his choice of academic interests. I like his slightly detached manner. I think he really looks the part of a dean. But I'm not so sure about his people skills. They certainly aren't evident in the way that this situation has been handled. Maybe people management is not a priority for the role of a dean. Maybe that's the presenter's role. We don't have a presenter at the moment, so the dean has been very stretched, doing both jobs, and Chapter don't seem to be advising him well. I don't know whether or not I respect the people who sit on Chapter. I don't know most of you. I've never met some of you. I've never heard of others of you. I don't know how you get appointed to your posts. I don't know who else knows you. I don't know how often you come to the cathedral and how many people you know. I don't think I'm unusual in this respect. So, I can imagine you in your meetings, Dean and Chapter, talking about wanting one of the best choirs in the UK and how best to go about it. I don't agree that shutting the choir down is going to help you achieve that. And neither do your friends, past and present, who are organising the Save Sheffield Cathedral Choir campaign. My understanding is that you think it's a good idea because you want radical change quickly, and gradual, incremental change just wasn't working. I think that you're being unrealistically ambitious, and you're not being fair on either yourself or on Josh. After the 2019 music review, you asked Josh to take over the choir. He had 6 months, from September to March, during which time, like the Dean, he was also doing at least 2 jobs, because he had no assistant director of music and also no organ scholar. He only had help from a music administrator towards the end. Josh worked like a trooper. He loved the job, the choir loved him, he was working so hard. You were also working hard, Peter. You were helping to look after Josh and the choir, and you gave a lot of time to it, and we appreciated that. You met regularly with Josh and with the choir parents committee. I think you're being harsh on both yourself and on Josh if you think you could have made more changes in those 6 months than you managed. I know that Dean and Chapter were delighted with Josh's performance. That is evident in your unanimous decision to appoint him as Master of Music, and he took up his post on the 8th of March. That was another surprise to the congregation, by the way, as you had told us all several times that you wouldn't be appointing a new director until the new precentor was in post. At the time, I wrote an email to you in response to the announcement saying how I welcomed it, but that it was a sudden change of plan. In terms of recruitment, during those 6 months, Josh had rebuilt relationships with 2 schools. He had just recruited 20 probationers when coronavirus broke out and we were in lockdown, so they didn't get the chance to start. He recruited so many of them because he knew that they wouldn't all see out their probationary period. There are not many families who are prepared to put in the huge commitment that being in a cathedral choir entails. There are other options for children to make great music in the city. Sheffield Music Hub and Sheffield Music Academy both offer a range of wonderful music groups that children can join. They are much less demanding in terms of time. Not everyone wants to be a chorister, and so the cathedral must value those who do make that commitment. Josh had plans for a Be a Chorister for the Day event. He had worked out what it would look like, and we were looking for a date in the diary when lockdown was suddenly upon us. We had already diversified the repertoire. You say that you'd like to hear more Tudor music. Tudor music has actually been a staple for the choir. They often sing Tallis, Bird, Gibbons, Tye and Smith. They might not sing as much Tudor music as you might like, but that's because they also sing music from plenty of other composers, such as Purcell, who is not Tudor. Don't worry about the mistake. I wouldn't have known either, but I asked my musician friends for advice. In the 6 months before lockdown, they sang a whole variety of music by composers such as Tabakova, Gorecki, Schutz, Victoria, Palestrina and James Whitbourne. The choir had a fantastic concert with the London Sinfonia, where they sang lots of modern pieces and the audience sat around the nave on cushions or were free to wander around as they wanted to. The clapping was saved until the end. It was a beautiful, meditative evening, like nothing I've ever experienced before. A hugely experimental and successful event, and the orchestra were full of praise for our excellent choir. The only disappointment was the low numbers in the audience, but that's not the fault of the music department. We all agree with you that it would be a great thing to see the choir singing with more instrumental accompaniment, such as brass and strings. Everyone loves the Christmas concert with the brass band and the ceremony of carols with the harp. They are highlights of the year, and the choir would love to do more events like this. Personally, I like guitars too, and I play the bass guitar, leading worship at All Saints Totley sometimes, but I know that's not your cup of tea. In terms of changing service times, we know that you did want to change the days that the choir sang. I understood that choir parents had said that we'd be happy for the schedule to change, as long as we were consulted and given enough notice to change our plans around. The children do lots of other things outside of choir, and it's not easy to juggle a family's busy schedule, so we needed some advance warning and a bit of flexibility, as anyone might expect. Did you understand that you had our support to make changes, as long as you discussed ideas with us first? So, yes, Dean and Chapter, I do think that you had a thoughtful, considered vision that involved diversifying and reaching out to more people, and that is still your plan. So I can see why many in the congregation continue to give you their support. Not much has changed. The only detail that has changed is that you suddenly decided to close the choir. Now don't tell me that that was always part of the plan. If it was, then you have misled us for a year. You have never mentioned that as a possibility since asking Josh to take over the choir in September. Only at the end of June, a few weeks ago, did you tell the choir that you'd be bringing Josh back off furlough and starting to think about plans for restarting as soon as it was possible. And after his resignation was announced a few days later, you met with the lay clerks and talked about appointing an interim person to lead the choir for a while before a new director of music was in post. Something else you may not know about, but the Vice Dean does, is that I had written a story for children, inspired by my work with Godly Play, about the history of Sheffield Cathedral. I thought the choir might like to use it at outreach events after lockdown. It's a story to be told using a sandbag and wooden blocks to show how the cathedral building developed over the centuries. The idea was I'd tell it to a group of children, and then they'd be free to go and explore the building and then come back together for a drink and a snack and talk about what they'd seen. The Vice Dean also wanted me to write a story about all the paraphernalia of the clergy, to explain its history and symbolism, and to make it all more accessible for the children. I'm also in the middle of writing and illustrating a children's picture book about the history of singing in church, all the way from the Stone Age to the present day. The Vice Dean and I had been talking about that over lockdown, and I thought I had his full support. If he knew of any plan to close the choir, then he was also misleading me in my expectations to plan and develop and use these stories. This sudden decision to close the choir has come out of the blue for everyone. That's not a good way to manage people. That's not a good way to build up one of the best choirs in the UK. The best choirs, such as Westminster Abbey or St John's College, Cambridge, have existed continuously for hundreds of years. They don't shut down and start again with new people. They pass on skills, knowledge and expertise down the generations little by little. A small boy or girl comes in as a probationer and follows the older children's lead. The children sing alongside adult professional singers and they pick up on their expertise. It's like an apprenticeship. Making your professional singers redundant is not a wise move. These people have sung for you for 10 or 20 years. You would have done better to ask them to take unpaid leave, but then you say that finances are not a problem. So what's the point of making them redundant? All anyone can think of is that you really want rid of those particular individuals. Wow, what did they do wrong? Saying that you want to build up the best choir in the UK and making your most experienced professional singers redundant at the same time is quite an insult and potentially damaging to their professional reputations. Did you mean to insult them? Or are they just a necessary casualty of your plans? The best choirs develop by incremental change as skills are built up and the standard of singing increases. That happens when choirs are well run, if the people are happy, if the music department is well supported by the clergy, if there is a safe and encouraging working culture. The director of music resigned 3 months after he was appointed to his post, saying that he was incompatible with the working culture of the cathedral. I know that you, Dean and Chapter, insist that you don't understand his reasons for resigning, and you don't see any reason why you should ask him. This is despite being urged to do so in the strongest possible terms by choir parents and the professional singers. The chair of the Choir Parents Committee and I made 2 formal parallel complaints in April about a bullying and harassment incident by cathedral management towards the director of music. He resigned in June. It is reasonable to think that there might be a connection, or at least to make every effort to assure yourself that there is not. It's this kind of intuition about people that is so important when you're responsible for managing and making decisions about a team. It feels like any skills that member of chapter have in this area are not in evidence here, meaning that the decisions you make in your meetings end up causing trauma to the children in the choir. You say it's not a big deal for them to have 12 months break. That might be true if they'd been given some warning and explanation. To have it sprung upon them at the end of 4 months of lockdown due to a global pandemic in which you didn't communicate with them once, and when their favourite thing that they were most looking forward to restarting was choir, and when they've already had to take on the chin the loss of 4 choir masters in 5 years without any explanation or emotional support from the cathedral, is a big deal. Can you understand that? It is a big deal, a really big deal. They have had no closure. They've had no chance to say goodbye. We've asked you to send them a photo of the choir and a Bible and a certificate, like you would normally give the choristers when they leave. I hope that you will do that. The children care so much about the choir. The adults care so much too. That's how choirs are. People care. They form close friendships. Are you threatened by those friendships? Does it feel like you were excluded? I don't think that's anyone's intention, and people will be sorry if that is how you feel. There seems to be some tension between choir and the dean and chapter. Is that true? It's a strange power dynamic that exists in lots of cathedrals. Does it really have to happen in Sheffield too? Can't we be better than that? Chapter, you are in an incredibly powerful position over the choir, and yet in 9 years I haven't seen you actively building relationships with the singers. You've made a major decision about something into which you have little insight or expertise. How many of you on chapter have sung in a cathedral choir before? Might it not be an idea to have musicians represented on chapter? It is, after all, quite an important part of cathedral life. It would be good to have a decision maker who understands the music department. Normally that role would be played by the precentor, I suppose. You're making a major decision about the choir while the member of chapter responsible for music isn't there. Is that wise? I wonder how well the congregation understand the music department. What do they think about so many directors of music leaving unexpectedly in unexplained circumstances in the last few years? Do they just think it's unfortunate? Do they understand how the cathedral is run and how and why chapter makes its decisions? Or do they just trust you because you're Christians in positions of authority? They think you must know what you're doing, and all they have to do is trust and obey and pray for you. The congregation do trust you, Mr. Dean. I don't know whether they know the people on chapter and trust them too, or whether they just trust them because you tell them to. I respect their faithfulness, but I'm sorry to say, in this situation, I think it's naive. I don't know the people on chapter, but I thought I knew you, Dean and Vice Dean. I thought I could trust you. I thought I knew where we were heading and that we were going there together. I didn't expect you to want to go it alone. Are you really going to make it a success of this? Are you really in touch enough to know how to support a brand new precentor and a brand new director of music setting up a music department from scratch when you've upset all the old crowd? Wouldn't it be better to stick with the people that you've got and build from there? The choir may not attract the numbers that you want to your services, but things could be done to improve that. A regular member of congregation wrote to me and gave me permission to quote her. She said, "The choir has been wonderful, the best free gig in Sheffield. I've been a regular attender at Evensong, a most beautiful service, but was always horrified to realise that almost nothing whatsoever was done to let outsiders know that it was taking place and that they would be welcome to attend. Sometimes there would be only 2 or 3 of us there. The choir is the best possible advertisement we have for the cathedral. To get rid of it is scandalous. The very least we could do is to have an A-frame board outside to let visitors know they're welcome and when it's happening, and that they don't have to participate if they don't want to. How are people shopping in Boots supposed to know that that's what the tolling bell means? Plus lots of mini videos to share on social media, plus people saying why they go. The music is divine. I've been bringing people with me for years. Now there's plenty of publicity for all the wrong reasons, but that could be used and turned around because it's helped to make the public aware that the cathedral choir exists." And now actually, the cathedral choir doesn't exist anymore. Have you come to terms with that? The choir may not have sung to the standard to which you aspire, but they might have been good enough as a start from which to build. They were good enough at this year's Advent Carol service, weren't they? You said you were pleased. Did you mean it? It's not a bad thing to be ambitious, but maybe sometimes we have to accept that good enough is good enough. especially when it's about our duty of care for people. All these people who feel rejected, and all those who feel angry on their behalf and are working for the Save Sheffield Cathedral Choir campaign, care deeply about this choir. It's not just your choir, it's their choir too. They're not your enemies. They're not spreading malicious lies like I think you might think. They want to see Sheffield Cathedral make a success of its choir, and they disagree with your course of action. Are friends allowed to disagree? They want the choir to be a success, and that's why they're bothering to speak out. They haven't just shrugged their shoulders and left you to it. They haven't walked out on you. You have so much publicity now, Dean and Chapter. The whole of Sheffield, if not the UK, knows that Sheffield Cathedral has ambitions to have a great choir but has shut down what it already has. Why not draw on the resources that you have? What advantages are there of discarding your current assets? Unless you see us as a barrier, in which case, why don't you talk about it and tell us what the problem is? No one intended to be a barrier. Why don't you work with the former choir members and build up the choir from there? I know it's messy. I know you'll have to have professional mediation now. You'll have to negotiate, hold meetings, talk to people openly, rebuild trust. I know it's simpler to just shut the choir, decide what to do, advertise that, and then see who wants to be a part of it. Simpler, yes. Effective? I doubt it. I commend to you Frederick Laloux's pioneering work on reinventing organisations, building on trust and relationships, rather than on control and hierarchy. The Church of England has a lot to learn from his work. And don't forget, Sheffield Cathedral is a place for all people. Does that mean only people who agree with Dean and Chapter, who do as they're told and fill your pews? Or will you allow people to bring their whole selves and really engage in the mission, as we want to do with you now? Thank you.